As we continue our coverage of the horrific shooting here at Uvalde, Texas, at Robb Elementary School, at least 21 people killed, 19 of them children. For more on the investigation and exactly what happened here in the school behind me, we're joined now by Lieutenant Chris Olivarez of the Texas Department of Public Safety. Lieutenant, you were telling me that the shooter drove his vehicle into a ditch not far from where we're standing, tried to enter the school, and met resistance from law enforcement right away?
That's correct. So prior to that, though, the shooter was involved in a domestic disturbance with his grandmother. We do know that he was living with his grandparents and was involved in some type of domestic disturbance with his grandmother, in which he shot his own grandmother. At that point, he fled from that residence to the area where the school is at. That's where the vehicle was crashed, and he was able to make entry into the school. That's when we got calls from local law enforcement that the shooter was making his way into the school.
So he meets resistance from law enforcement at the gate, fights his way in. Once he's inside the school, what happens?
Right, so we had local police officers here from the Uvalde Police Department, school police officers, as well as state troopers that were responded on scene first. They were the primary officers on scene. They heard the gunfire. They saw the shooter. At that point, they were met with gunfire by the shooter. Several police officers were shot.
Wow.
At that point, the gunman, the shooter, was able to make entry into a classroom, barricaded himself, and at that point, it just started shooting children and teachers that were inside that classroom, having no regard for human life. Just a complete tragedy, and an evil person going into this school and killing children for no reason whatsoever.
How was law enforcement eventually able to breach that classroom and take out the shooter?
Right, so at that point, the initial officers that were on scene, they were at a point of disadvantage. There was no way they were able to make entry, especially with the amount of manpower that was on scene. So at that point, their primary focus was to evacuate as many children as possible. Teachers that were breaking windows around the school trying to evacuate children to prevent any further loss of life. But again, they kept hearing the gunfire as they were doing this, as they were performing these rescues. We had a specialized tactical law enforcement team arrive, comprised of federal law enforcement, local law enforcement, state law enforcement, that were able to make forcible entry into that classroom. And just goes to show you that placing their own lives between the shooter and those children to try to prevent any further loss of life. As they entered that classroom, one of those officers was met with gunfire. He was hit, he was shot. He is out of the hospital. And at that point, they were able to shoot and kill the shooter and prevent any further loss of life.
It's so scary to think this could have been even worse than what it was.
Right.
So that's the how. What about the why? What do we know at this hour? The shooter kills or attempts to kill his grandmother. She's clinging to life at the moment, and then drives here. Was this a target, premeditated, or just what he saw next?
You know, that's what we're still trying to determine, exactly what the motives were, what the indicators were, if there was any red flags prior to this mass shooting. We are working with our FBI partners, ATF, local law enforcement, as well as with the school. Our Texas Rangers right now are the lead investigating agency. But we're trying to determine that. We know right now that this individual, the shooter, did reside in the Uvalde area, did attend a local high school, was living with his grandparents, no friends, no girlfriends at this time that we know of, was unemployed, no criminal history, no gang affiliation. So we're trying to determine exactly what the motive was and what any indicators at all whatsoever prior to the shooting.
And so he does this with an assault-style rifle, an AR-15 style rifle. How is he able to obtain that? What are the rules around here for acquisition?
That's a good question. So exactly, we're trying to determine exactly how he obtained this rifle, how it was purchased, when it was purchased. So that's why we have ATF working closely with our Texas Rangers trying to make that determination. Again, as I mentioned, no criminal history, no gang affiliation. So again, trying to determine exactly how he was able to purchase this rifle, the capacity, the type of rifle that he was in possession of.
All right, Lieutenant Olivarez, we are so grateful to law enforcement for stopping this, knowing it could have been even worse.
Right, exactly.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.